why can't Democrats have nice things? The specific issue in question is paid family leave, and especially paid family leave in Washington, D.C., which recently passed the best law perhaps in the country on that issue, and now is busy perhaps undermining that very law. Here to talk about that with us now is Hannah Weilbacher. Hannah is a volunteer leader for Jews United for Justice and D.C. Paid Family Leave Campaign. So first of all, Hannah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So just, first of all, if you would just tell us a little bit about the law that got passed, when it got passed, what it did, that sort of thing.
Great question. The Universal Paid Leave Act was passed in December of this year, which was amazing. It was one of the happiest days of my life. And it came from a few years of a lot of intense work, first building a policy that was putting vulnerable people at the center of this policy. And then through a lot of community organizing and coalition building and a lot of talking with members of the council, we won what, like you said, is one of the most progressive paid family and medical leave programs in the country. Now, I didn't say the word generous, the most generous. I find that word, I understand why people say that, you know, this program that has 8 weeks of parental leave, 6 weeks of family caregiving leave, and 2 weeks of medical leave is generous, but it's hard for me to say that when I know that this is to support people who are, you know, whose moms are dying in a hospice, whose babies are staying by themselves in a NICU right now. I just think generosity is not necessarily the right term.
And I also think, well, you know, I couldn't agree with you more. It's a fantastic point, Hannah, because number one, we're not really talking about generosity. We're talking about what a decent society does. And number two, you know, that's compared to what we have now, which is archaic by the standards of every other developed nation on earth, basically. So if you look at what other nations have, this is not a generous plan either compared to what's available to you in a European country or, you know, other parts of the world, right? Isn't that true?
Oh, not even. You know, we can talk about Scandinavia, but my heart will break. But compared to what they have, we have very little. But there are only 2 countries in the whole world without any sort of maternity leave at all: Papua New Guinea and the United States.
Well, there we go.
That's it. So it's not even just Scandinavia. We're not even just talking about that. We're talking about how every other country in the world has considered this part of what we do as a society, how we take care of each other.
Right. And somehow they work it out. You know, somehow they manage to function as an economy. Employers can employ, small businesses can function. It all works out. So we passed this law, and basically, I don't remember the exact numbers, but for a few dollars contribution to each paycheck, people, and again, it's not generous because it's not like you get your full salary if you use it, right? You get some percentage up to a cap. I can't remember, but isn't that roughly right?
Yes, exactly. So the way it works is employers pay into a public insurance fund on behalf of their employees, which is really exciting for employers that I've talked to, the many employers who were involved in the Paid Family Leave Coalition, because basically what it means is they pay in a small percentage of their payroll into a universal paid leave insurance fund, 0.62% of their payroll budget, and then all of their employees are covered. Which is exactly the kind of universal program that businesses, especially small businesses that we were talking to, were really wanting. So then what happens is when you need to take, let's say I needed to take paid leave because I got hit by a bus, for example. I used to say that as a joke throughout the campaign. And then my friend got hit by a bus and she's okay, but it's just a reminder that this stuff happens.
Of course it happens, sure.
So it made it much more real for me to tell that. So let's say I get hit by a bus, then what I do is I can take...
I used to say get hit by a bakery truck, by the way, just because that never happened. Now watch, I'm going to step outside again.
I know for sure. So then what happens is I would take a percentage of my salary, from the insurance fund, and my employer wouldn't have to pay me out of their pocket at all, right?
It's an insurance program.
They've already paid in for the year. They can budget that amount accordingly every year. So it doesn't matter if there was no leaves that year or a bunch of leaves that year. It doesn't change their bottom line at all, which is the predictability that we've heard is really important.
Right, and just if you know offhand, what are the numbers? I mean, what do I get if I'm a DC employee and I get hit by a bakery truck?
So one of the things that makes our program so amazing, that we've kind of leapfrogged ahead of other states, is that we have what's called a progressive wage replacement rate, and I'll break that down. So basically, the less money you make, the higher percentage of your paycheck you get back.
Okay.
So for people up to, I believe it's 150% of minimum wage, people who make up to, minimum wage workers and 150% of minimum wage, they get 90% of their paycheck back.
Okay.
And basically, the more you make, the less
Sure.
it goes down. And there's a $1,000 a week cap. So those are the numbers, but the value behind that is that there are other states that kind of had a blanket amount that everybody takes. It was about 55-60%. Everybody gets that when they go on leave, which is great, right?
Which
That's
is
more
usually,
than zero.
And it goes up to a certain level and then it stops.
Right. So, but if you have this kind of flat rate, then what we were seeing in other states was low wage workers, minimum wage is already basically zero. 55% of zero, half of zero is zero, right? They weren't taking it. It wasn't actually helping the people it was designed to help. So that's why we needed to change that.
No, I think it is a great design. And again, we're talking with Hannah Weilbacher. Is it Weilbacher or Backer?
It could be either, but I say Weilbacher. Thank you for asking.
All right. Volunteer leader for Jews United for Justice and DC Paid Family Leave Campaign. Yeah. Okay, so now let's get to the part where Democrats can't have nice things. Mm-hmm. And she says, okay, that's how we know you were Jews United for Justice. But don't ask. But okay, so DC, first of all, as most people know around the country, is a highly democratic city. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about a city where we have to compromise with the dominant Republican Party. We could get into governance and all that, but on the DC elected level, this is a democratic city. So what's happened now to this law, which we all celebrated when it was passed in December? Yeah.
So what's happened now, there are a few things. And I also should say, just for the record, that a lot of what I'm going to hypothesize is really conjecture, because I can't guess what the mayor is thinking. Mm-hmm. I can't guess what council members Che and Evans are thinking. So I'll just say I'll explain how it looks to me on the outside.
All right.
The mayor has never been supportive of paid family medical leave in DC. She has given different reasons every time. Every few months, she has a different reason for why she does not support paid family medical leave, which leads me to believe that it's not based on principle, that it's more that she has heard from large industries that this is not what they want, and that they're pressuring her to oppose it. We were worried after the bill was passed that she was going to veto the bill, but she didn't. So that was awesome. But there was a while where we were really worried, because she was coming out pretty publicly that she was not in support of this. And she ended up not vetoing it. She also didn't sign it. So she's still not in favor of this, but she did not veto it. So that's great. And now,
so what happens procedurally? So it passes into law?
Yes. So, we have to get into congressional review, which who knows what Congress will do.
Okay. Yeah, we know about that.
DC statehood, a whole other issue we have to work on, and we are working on. And then what happened is council members Che and Evans each introduced functionally repeal and replace paid family leave programs, which is really, why Democrats can't have nice things, right? And something else we've been saying is, with Democrats like these, who really needs Republicans?
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I guess Republicans might not offer anything, but it strikes me from what I've seen that their alternative, the alternative of these two Democratic council members, is it's it's so complicated. It kind of takes the worst of past programs. It's so, I don't want to say neoliberal, because that word gets thrown around a lot, but it strikes me as coming from a bad philosophical approach to government. But tell us a little bit about what their proposal is. And
so I also just want to ground this in how much paid family and medical leave is desperately needed right now, and how the movement for paid family leave has started decades ago. And this campaign specifically, when I started, I used to work at Jews United for Justice. Now I'm a volunteer, but I used to work there when I started working there in September of 2014. That's when we really kicked this off, right? So this has been happening for a long time, and every day we delay, there is, like I mentioned, one of the volunteers who was very involved in the campaign volunteers also at a hospice in Anacostia, actually. And she basically takes care of people whose families can't be there with them because they're working,
Right.
and paying for the hospice care and paying for all
Right.
the things they need to do. So there are people in hospice right now who are dying with no one by their side, right? And any attempt to delay this is just unconscionable, especially
Right, and
given.
think about that for a second. There are people out there with only a few days or weeks to live.
Yeah.
And the people who love
they're-
them can't spend
yeah.
those final days and weeks with them.
It's
They're
ridiculous.
deprived of their last few days with the ones they love because this bill
Right.
is not
And even
gonna
from a business
implement
perspective,
it.
right? Like, those people who are sitting there alone, their sons and daughters are sitting at work, doing a terrible job at work, not being
Right.
productive or anything you want to say about that, right? Because their mind is somewhere else. They can't
Right.
be there right now. So who knows what's happening to the bottom line? Not to mention all the other reasons that people need to take paid leave. So I am seeing what Councilmembers Che and Evans are doing as just straight up trying to.
So what are they
to push
doing
this.
exactly?
So
Yeah.
Councilmember Evans introduced a bill that seems very similar to the employer mandate bill that was introduced. That was kind of they tried to introduce it at the end of the process in the end of 2016, which is basically functionally just a mandate that all businesses now have to provide paid leave, which is incredibly unhelpful when you're a business that's trying to provide paid leave and you literally can't afford it, right? Like you just don't have the money to pay someone out of pocket when they're not working.
So is that all it says? Well, you have to provide paid leave?
I believe so. I actually haven't read that specific bill.
Okay. So,
So someone, you all should read it, listeners.
because the impression I had,
Yeah.
I read about it a
Yeah.
little bit. I haven't read the bill itself. And the impression I had was, first of all, that it exempts we'll have to go into this
Yeah.
further, but that it exempts people businesses below a certain
Yeah.
size, which means that certain people will be left out of the
Oh, yeah.
process. And it also, one of the things that really bothered me about it, from what I saw, was that you get into, the great thing about government managed programs like Social Security, for example, or Medicare,
Yeah.
is that you get away, if they're universal, if they're
Yeah.
an earned benefit that everyone is entitled to get, you don't have to test, well, how large is your employer?
Oh, totally.
All those things. All you know is the government runs it, you're entitled to it, you get it.
Yeah.
And the administrative costs go way down. My sense
Yes.
of this bill, that counter bill that's being proposed, is that it's very complicated, and that's what I kind of meant by neoliberal, that you have to go to the private sector, that you have to depend on you have to apply different conditions
Yep.
and rules, and so philosophically what bothers me about it is that it's that dominant branch of the Democratic Party, not everyone, but that branch of the Democratic Party that says you're not entitled to this as a human right.
Right.
You have to qualify for it. It
Yeah.
depends on who your employer is. It depends on all these conditionalities.
Yeah.
Whereas the great breakthroughs that we've had in government programs have been Medicare. Everybody over
Right.
65 should have health care. Social Security. Everybody should pay into a program that guarantees them some financial security when they retire or if they're disabled.
Right.
So this is what I mean. So why do you think these two council members are impeding progress here?
Yes, I will answer that, but I also haven't talked about Councilmember Che's bill, so I'll just touch on that briefly.
Okay.
Which is basically a hybrid of an employer mandate plus the Universal Paid Leave Act, which don't even get me started about how complicated that sounds. To mush all these together and make what's basically an unenforceable patchwork of employer policies, right? Instead of a universal program. So it's just different for every size business. Businesses under 5 are totally excluded. Those are the businesses, especially self-employed people, that were really drawn to the Universal Paid Leave Act because let's say you are a small business of just you and one other person. If one of you needs to take leave, right now you're trying to pay them out of pocket. It's impossible, right? It's just it's impossible to do. But what they want to see is a way that they can just pay into this. 0.62 was a good number for them. They actually, like a lot of people were saying, they would pay more, so 0.62 was good, and then be able to cover themselves and their other employee. There's a small business, a yoga studio in Petworth, that's run by a woman named Julie, who she has to pay her yoga teachers every time there's a yoga class, right? And she had a yoga teacher who needed to take leave. And she taught the Wednesday night classes, right? So this woman needed to take leave, but Julie did not have in her budget money to pay for this woman to take leave and her sub. She couldn't
Right.
do
Well,
both.
it's a lot of
so
money
she
for a
paid
small
for this
business.
woman. She paid for this woman's maternity leave out of her own pocket because
Right.
she didn't have it in the studio budget. But she was saying that she would have loved to pay 0.62%. That is a much lower cost, and then all of her employees would be covered. So under 5 people are totally excluded. 5 to 49 employees. I think it seems to be about the same as the Universal Paid Leave Act, although I would be surprised if it was enforced. So it feels like people actually won't get
Right.
it. And then over 50 employees, they basically have an employer mandate. And the questions we have to ask ourselves there are, my first question is like, who is writing these bills? It's clear that it's, huge industry lobbyists. And for me, there's information there, right? Like whoever writes these bills, people say follow the money, follow the bills, follow the bill writers. The Universal Paid Leave Act was written by a coalition of policy experts plus groups who are accountable to the most vulnerable people in our city. And this was written by industry lobbyists. So where does that come from? And the other questions we're asking ourselves are, is there a profit motive to deny leave in either of these Che or Evans bills? Because if there is, then what's going to happen, right? The employers are going to deny leave, discriminate against people in hiring, or just straight up fire people. And it's unclear that there'll be any enforcement mechanisms not to, and it makes sense, right? I look as a woman of childbearing age to an employer, I'll look like I have a higher price tag than someone else.
Right.
Whereas a Universal Paid Leave Act has, you're paying the same percentage no matter what people are, no matter who's taking leave and no matter how many people are taking leave.
No, and again, that's a great benefit of a universal program. So we have about a minute left. So what happens next?
Oh, what happens next? What happens next is that the community all needs to speak up, right? We have to be clear that the Wilson Building is not run by industry lobbyists, which is what it seems like right now. Councilmembers Che and Evans had an opportunity to be a part of the democratic process that passed the Universal Paid Leave Act. I personally was often the ones reaching out to council offices. Councilmember Che and Evans did not meet with the Ward 3, Ward 2, and the people all across the city that I was bringing to them, that they were coming or were coming to the council building of their own accord. They would not meet with them. They would often connect us with a staff member they were always very nice, but it was clear that the buck didn't stop with them and they couldn't really give us any information. And it was unclear what happened from those meetings. And now we hear that industry lobbyists can pick up the phone and get a meeting immediately and write a whole new bill with Councilmembers Che and Evans.
Where did we hear that?
Oh, I mean, they're telling us.
Oh, okay.
So it's just ridiculous. They had an opportunity. There were 3 public hearings about this bill, the Universal Paid Leave Act. That's 2 more than most bills even have. One had over 100 community members testifying. That was the opportunity, and that was February of 2016. That was a long time ago at this point, right? That was their opportunity to figure this out. And they didn't figure it out. And
all right, well,
there you go.
Unfortunately, this is something we're going to have to keep struggling with, but we're going to stay on top of this story.
Let's do it.
Thanks so much, Hannah Weilbacher, for tracking this, volunteer coordinator for Jews United for Justice, and thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.